everybody. Let me also start by thanking Christina and also Delphine, because through the years, I mean, they have been participating in contributing some of the ideas that you will be hearing from me today. So if I may, I will share my screen, see how it works. And I'll share the screen because I would like to start from some context. And thanks also for the presentation, Marina. So you will get that where I come from, because about 30 years ago, when I started the social policy program in IUCN, and you all know what IUCN is about, so I'm not going to say it. The key word, which I hope you see in the screen right now, the key word that you would find on the lips of everybody involved in conservation was management. And it took me and others, many others, about 10 years to move to governance, and then to diversity and quality of governance. And with that, we could better understand systems of protected areas and landscape conservation. It was about the end of the first decade of the second millennium that we reached some understanding of voluntary and ancillary conservation. And that allowed the opening up of respectability, let's say, not only to protected areas as area-based conservation, but also to conserved areas. And at the same time, and this was at the time of the Sydney World Parks Congress of 2014, we started talking really seriously about vitality of governance. And in the last few years, this led us towards custodianship and territories of life. Now, you all know this, and management and governance are complementary concepts. And for management, we ask, did we achieve our goals? Do we have management effectiveness? And for governance, we look at the diversity, quality, and vitality. Who is taking decision? How are decisions implemented and respected? And then we look at the question for vitality today. About what? About, and I'm sorry, I'm not discussing very much OECMs, about conserved areas or protected areas or both. And conserved areas are areas that have intrinsic integrity and health. That's the way in which I define them. And protected areas, however, are something else. They have a label that has been given to them by either IUCN or CBD, or in fact, more practically by the government of the states where they are in. Now, vitality of governance. Why am I so passionate about vitality? Probably is because this is one concept that has in it the deepest and most profound entities and concepts that we have in the world. I mean, first of all, you all know vitality comes from the Latin term vita, which means life. And all of us involved in conservation, involved in people and conservation, really care about life. And we do all understand that there is no life without change. I mean, life is expressed in change. But we also want to see something else besides change in life. We want to see meaning. And vitality of governance is a concept that really pulls the three together about protected and conserved areas. So we applied to governance institutions. And we say, and this was started in Sydney, but it actually evolved after Sydney, we say that the governance institution exhibits vitality as it shows its capacity to function fully through time and in inspiring ways. Why in inspiring ways? Because a governance institution is not alone. It is embedded into a society, and it needs to be able to make sure that the society adheres to these decisions and is respectful of the rules that the institution has developed. And also, we need to see that this institution is capable of doing that, not only in a static way, but in an evolving way, because the environment naturally changes. So what kind of questions are we looking into when we explore vitality? For how long has this institution been functioning? Is it functioning with excellence, not just, run-of-the-mill and boring kind of stuff? Is it really excellent? Is it inspiring for society, exactly as I was just trying to explain? Has it been able to respond to the context, thereby evolving, changing appropriately? And if we look into the future, for how long we believe this is going to be remaining able to function, to inspire, and to evolve. Now, where can we learn about vitality? Well, we can learn from many different areas and directions. We can learn by examining concept in professional literature. And there are many germane concepts to vitality of governance. You have resilience, subsidiarity, sustainability, socio-ecological fit. You can spend years, believe me, looking at this. And I did a bit of that. We can also learn about understanding governance institutions, not just as organization or just as rules, but as systems. So rather than focusing on an organization and considering that that organization needs to maintain itself through time, or the rules need to be maintained through time, we need to look at the capacity to function maintained through time, engaging change, as we were saying. We can learn, and I think this is the most fascinating part, we can learn from prehistory and history. And if you look into the prehistory of Homo sapiens, and not even Homo sapiens, the Homo genus on the planet, which is about 3 million years, you can see that there are elements of vitality there. I mean, we have been living and in fact thriving by foraging and utilizing mostly mobility. But if you look, for instance, into where we have a little bit more information in the last 10, 12,000 years in the Holocene, foraging is being also integrated by transhumant and nomadic pastoralism and shifting cultivation in the tropics. So we can learn from these interactions of people with the environment that lasted a long time. Just coming even closer to us, the last 2,000 years, we find amazing, successful relationship between people and their environment in some institutions that, monastic institutions, for instance, was a discovery for me to figure out how important and how successful they have been. And so what is their secret? And then community governing their commons in some places, in some settlements have been there for centuries. And so what is their secret? And much more recently, much closer to us, in the last 100 years, we see that state governments have developed institutions to govern protected areas. And they do not have much to show about vitality because they have been so young, but they really aspire to vitality, let's put it that way. Another area where we can learn a lot, and probably we'll hear about also today, is from case example of conserved and protected areas. I've been dedicating quite a bit of time in the last 2 years to do exactly that. So there is no recipe. There is no one thing that you can get out of all these pathways of learning that tells you what it is that you have to do to have governance vitality. But we have identified a number of characteristics and features of the governance institution that seem to be really positive for vitality. The first one is strategic adaptability, the capacity to be flexible and to learn from what is going on in the environment, to be timely, to be responsive, to be learning, and the capacity on the one hand to change, including change by metamorphosis, really serious change, but also the capacity to resist change if the conditions are really not bearable for this situation. Second characteristic, creativity and empowerment. It is not just about reacting to what is going on in the environment, but to be able to act, to self-motivate, to self-organize, to have the capacity to see things from a diversity of perspectives, pluralism, if you want, and also not only seeking rights, but also embracing responsibility, having a sense of self-discipline. Third characteristic, connectivity and collaboration. Every system that works well needs to generate, circulate, acquire, use a number of resources and information. And in the case of institutions for the governance of protected and conserved areas, is necessary to have political, technical, economic support. So that is best with a sense of legitimacy and good collaboration in society. Then wisdom from local experience. This is something, I don't know if you have ever encountered in your work James Scott, but he has a wonderful concept called METIS, which is the practical knowledge that comes from socio-ecological history. And that is truly important for institutions for governance, because it allows effective and efficient use of the gifts of nature, if you want, and also to use everything that is available to the fullest. But possibly the most interesting of all the characteristics that we have found is that governance vitality thrives on inspiring collective values. Now, what is that? Vital institutions need to have something to draw motivation and energy from. And those that seem to be the best are the situations when there are strong bonds between a community, a society, whatever you call it, a human body, and the territory. The institution draws energy from those bonds, but also expresses them and nourishes them. And what are those bonds? Well, they include the most basic of them all, the biological purpose of living, livelihoods, food, water, shelter, nurturing, but also conceptual meanings. And you tell me, I mean, biodiversity conservation, what is more conceptual than that? And of course, cultural values, the survival of Gaia, the future, conceptual meanings go together very well. And extremely powerful are emotional attachments to place, and this is common in many communities throughout the world, but also with place to one another, to the group. So attachment to place and collective identities have been extremely powerful for governing conserved and protected areas throughout the world. And you see it very well in indigenous societies, because they are the ground on which they seek self-determination. Now, a point that I will never underline enough is that strong bonds are extremely powerful and provide an opportunity, an enormous opportunity for good governance and conservation, but they also provide a danger. They can inspire people to be the best that they can be, responsibility, generosity, hard work, you name it, but also they can be the worst they can be. They can feel that they are better than anybody else. So nativism, racism, all the others are not as good as we are. And this ends up at times in brutality, violence, wars, you name it. So we are touching some of the most powerful energies that exist in the world, in collective and in their relationship with the environment. And some people would say that leaders are extremely important to motivate in one direction or the others. I would say that even more than leaders is the strength of the bond, the length of the connection with the environment, the action, the repeated action, the rituals that really create the relationship in itself. In fact, these bonds generate communities and define territories. Now, this is a complex slides. It's just to say that there are a variety of possible inspiring collective values, but they all together create a dynamic field of tension, what I consider a field of tension, where purpose, meaning, and emotions end up providing the energy for the functioning of a governance institution and its capacity to inspire the broader societies. They are the heart of the vitality of an institution. Drawing from all this, we can define custodianship. And custodianship is a collective bond that is with the territory, of course, that is capable of nourishing that purpose, that meaning, those emotions through times. In many ways, custodianship is the visible face of governance vitality. And you can see it on lengthy and enduring relationship when you have attention, care, even love between a group and a particular place and environment. And with that, there is not only connection to place, there may be connection with the ancestors, a sense of continuity through time. And what is interesting is that custodianship is not only for indigenous peoples or local communities. When you start thinking about that, that's natural to think about that. Not at all. It could also be for a private estate or for a protected areas governed by a government agency or for an NGO, you name it. It is the strength of the bond that makes the difference rather than the type of institution. And here you can even, I'm sure you are familiar with the definition of territories of life provided by the ICCA consortium that has been a partner with the WWF in many situations, but we can even have a simpler definition of territories of life. Territories of life are those that sustained and benefited from the custodianship of human communities. They are products of vital governance demonstrated through time. And one more concept, and then I'll end with that, is patrimony. I don't know if you have ever come across this concept by Henri Olagnon. It has been around for about 40 years, and it is defined like this: the sum of material and immaterial elements that concur to maintaining the identity and autonomy of those who govern that patrimony. So in order to understand it, you just have to make a distinction between patrimony and property. Property, you give it a monetary value, you can sell it, you can buy it. Patrimony, it would be unthinkable to give monetary value and to sell it and to buy it, because it would be like cutting a piece of yourself. It's foundational for your own identity. On the contrary of wanting to sell your property, a patrimony, you want to give it work, you want to invest in it, you want to be responsible, you want to discover the beautiful elements of aesthetic or spiritual value in it. You want to understand it as much as possible, you want to conserve it. And then let me ask you this question: do you think that a patrimonial approach is necessary for vitality of governance or not? Just consider it, and also consider that today, the most fashionable of all approaches is actually the opposite of the patrimonial approach, is the approach of economic valuation of nature. So big question mark. Now, this is my last slide, and I'm hoping not too many of you, but I'm sure some of you will be thinking, okay, this is nonsense, this is idealistic, this is not applicable to real life. What am I going to be doing with this? Yes, I get your point. You have to do everyday things that seem to be quite far away from this. But even today, around the world, there are people who are really risking their life, if not actually dying or being personally hurt, by protecting and defending their territories. That energy, that collective purpose, the meaning, the emotions are fundamental for custodianship. And conservation professionals can, on the one hand, highlight and channel that energy and actually make sure that it doesn't derive somewhere else and remain sane and life-supporting. But they can also nourish it where it is not there. They can promote and secure the bonds of attachment to place and collective livelihoods, collective knowledge, collective rights, collective responsibilities, identity, care. And this should not be done by tricking communities in, but really in a way that consciously promotes their adoption in a conscious and willful way. What is good news is that there are tools to promote that. I don't have the time to discuss this today, but there are indicators for vitality of governance. There are processes like self-strengthening, as my colleague was saying before, and self-assessment processes for governance institutions and even policies that can truly promote this. And let me clarify that a focus on effective management and economic valuation of nature, and a focus on governance vitality and patrimony, a patrimonial approach, are quite apart. They are not the same thing. So this is a question for all of you, a genuine question. Which approach, in your view, has better chances for conservation and sustainable livelihoods? One, the other, a combination of both? What do you think? Thank you so much for listening to me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for this presentation, Grazia. And I would like to open the floor. If there are any questions, we would like to hear from you. We want to hear your voices because this is also part of what vitality means, listening to everyone.
Grazia, I was very moved by your presentation. It resonates with me as a human being more than anything else. The connection to nature on the value-based system is the most important. You also touched, though, briefly on this fact that it has a tension with economic value of nature, and really non-profit organizations, especially our own, included in that, are obviously on a track to try to strengthen the value of nature on an economic basis to be able to drive investment. You've also noticed that a lot of financing now is directed at CBOs, CSOs, IPLCs, and not to say that they, it's wanting to see greater investment at the community level to drive change happen there, not necessarily where organizations like ourselves take most of the funding and drive the development for change through the organization. So this is a little bit in a conflict with what you propose now, and while I completely agree with you, we shouldn't diminish the value system that, the patrimony example is perfect one for me, it resonates with me, but how do we marry these two? Because it needs to be greater investment to strengthen protection and conservation of these spaces. This is going to cost money ultimately, but you can't motivate money without value in rands and cents often. So keen to hear your thoughts on how that disconnect is going to be reconnected if it needs to.
I find that question the most challenging and the most interesting. And I do agree that the two elements are not an extreme either or, but they need somehow to be integrated. But let me say this, I would say that integration can happen only if governance vitality is there. So if you start from governance vitality, you can add economic valuation, you can add flows of resources, you can be sure that the patrimonial relation is stronger than whatever comes in with the monetary valuation of nature. But if you don't have governance vitality, if you don't have that patrimonial relation, the economic valuation can sweep away anything. And in fact, there are so many potential conflicts that are brought in that I'm afraid that we are killing what we want to save, and killing it fast and killing it with might. So in a way, I would say that, yes, the combination is what is needed, but one needs to be first. And that first is indeed governance vitality. Otherwise, good luck to all of us.
Thank you,
Fascinating,
Grazia. Very
Grazia.
helpful.
Yes, I think that was very helpful for all of us. Thank you so much, Grazia.